And I transformed myself as a person in the way I spoke, in the way I dressed up, in the way I communicated, and I networked with people to a point where I was able to land a director job at Lear as a sales and marketing person.
Hello, I'm Isabelita. I'm an executive career transition advisor. Welcome to the 6th episode of Coffee with Top Elite Executives. I'll be speaking to the creme de la creme, senior leaders and managers who have crossed my path along my career journey and truly impressed me based on their leadership skills and charisma. My goal and mission is to share with my audience insights and expertise that can be followed as a success formula. Today's guest is a senior leader from the automotive industry with 25 years of experience leading critical missions initiatives for public and private equity owned companies. Michael is a highly established technical and commercial leader and started his career at Daimler Chrysler with the introduction of the very first airbag. He then moved to Nissan, Lear, and Humanetics, where he was able to establish new entities and develop business footprint in Japan, China, India, Korea, Brazil, and USA. Michael sees his profession as a mission to save people's lives during car accidents. Now I invite you to join me in welcoming Michael Jarouche. Michael, first of all, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really pleased to have you on the show and, for having you to share your advice and expertise with my audience. Wow, this is really impressive. Like, I'm really impressed because mission to save people's lives. Wow, this is a really big deal, Michael, especially during accidents, of course, when, something that's totally unforeseen and nobody can help. Now, you mentioned earlier to me that, you introduced the very first airbag. Oh, I'm very curious to know. This is really fascinating. But just before we tell our audience more about airbags and your mission, why don't we start by telling us a little bit about your background and how you became such a successful American Lebanese executive?
Well, Isabelita, good morning, first of all, and thank you very much for having me on the show.
It's my pleasure.
I hope I can offer some help to your audience by sharing my background and provide some advice into some lessons learned from my career path. First of all, I really consider myself to be a citizen of the world because I have roots in Lebanon, I have roots in Brazil, in Venezuela, and in the U.S. And I've traveled the world on business in many countries, like you mentioned. I started out having a great passion for cars, and for that reason, I came to the U.S. and I finished my bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and right after that, I was very motivated to join the automotive field. I was successful to go to Chrysler, and I was working on the most exciting technology at the time, which is putting airbags in first vehicles in the USA back in the late 80s. And, the airbags have grown to be from driver to passenger, then to the seats, then to the headliners, and now there's almost 16 airbags in the cars that we drive today. It's a technology that saved many lives. So I felt from a very young age, I was working in a mission critical technology development that really gained a lot of respect in the industry and propelled me to really then join Nissan. And Nissan was trying to get established in the US to bring also airbags and seatbelts into their vehicles, which I also worked on. And then, shortly after about 10 years working as an engineer, I realized that I need to make a transformation. And this really took a lot of guts and it took a lot of determination, because then I was really feeling that I have so much to offer than just being an engineer. And I transformed myself as a person in the way I spoke, in the way I dressed up, in the way I communicated, and I networked with people to a point where I was able to land a director job at Lear as a sales and marketing person. And from there, I went into supply chain management, and then I started my exposure to Europe and to the Far East, and became responsible for actually building teams in countries like China from ground zero, in Korea, in India, in Japan, and in Germany, including all the other surrounding countries like the Netherlands and Italy and France and Spain. And of course, Brazil is also another country that is really very close to heart, but it's another country that kind of goes up and down, but nevertheless, I have built teams in Brazil as well.
Lovely.
So I think really the background that I have, the transition from technical to commercial, and really being very honest about my work style and my objectives and my communication, the transparency that I provided to all the cultures that I've dealt with, have really made me a successful leader to continue that.
Wow, very, very interesting. I think this is really, I believe, Michael, that sometimes we have passion for things. So we can, because we have a reason to be in this life, in this world, and I always associate everything to an extent to spirituality, or why are we here? Why do we like the things we do? Why are we in this path? Why do we meet the people we meet? And I find so interesting that when you tell me, I am really passionate about innovation and transformation, and and transforming to do see better for the world. And suddenly you went through your personal transformation first, so you could actually then develop those skills. So how interesting is that? It's just wondering what comes first. Is it your personal mission or your mission towards the people? It ends up in being actually one thing, is the transformation, right? So now, having said that, Michael, you mentioned so many countries, like China, India, Korea, Brazil, US. Wow, that's really like very, very multicultural and so many different kind of styles. I can imagine you must have encountered some big challenges, if not just a few, but some very big challenges with cultural differences, or who knows, perhaps even some political boycotts. Would you be able to describe, if you're comfortable, any situation, and how did you deal with that? How did you, how were you able to project, be successful in deals and going through this kind of situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually learned how to deal with the multicultural issues the hard way. I started out, I'll give you a couple examples. I started out in Europe, trying to really grow Europe to the next level. Europe was very slow for the company. And we had presence at the time in the Netherlands. And we tried to actually have, the people from the Netherlands communicate directly with the Germans, which is the main country for the automotive industry. And I think the best recipe to making cultures communicate is to create a win scenario where we're together winning something that's great, that makes people respect each other.
Lovely, lovely.
Yeah. I've had instances where I've put more than 145 customers together in one big room for 2 days with 27 different languages. Wow. So I've really learned how to make sure that people are communicating together on a multi-level.
Lovely, lovely. Wow, this is a big skill because, eventually, honestly, let's be honest, sometimes people will tick you off. Right now, I think the biggest difference, because we have different buttons that are pressed, and like, for instance, very well, Brazilians, I'm Latin. Sometimes, it's like, okay, it's not about so much changing your DNA. It's hard to change your DNA, but then learning to understand, hang on, there is no intention in treating or being treated in a way. It's literally about, their personal life experience, culture, background. So if you learn how to say, it's okay, it's just not intentional or not personal, then you're able to understand, hang on, what is our objective here? And I also work with very multicultural. I have clients in 25 countries at the moment, of more than 16 nationalities. So I cannot exactly have the same feedback or give the same feedback to every client. And I'm learning so much from this experience as well. So if you understand, hang on, what is our objective here? We work for the goal, right? We don't take anything personal, and we adjust the process along the way. And this way, there's no personal offense or misunderstanding. But this is amazing, Michael. Wow, having 140 people from 7 different languages and categories, let's put it like this, because, it's not like one mindset, it's totally different, right? It's almost people from different planets in a way, right?
Absolutely. And can you imagine the creativity you get from having all these multicultural together?
Yes.
Companies that rely on more than one mindset are the ones that win in the future, because every culture brings another piece to the puzzle with more creativity to get the bigger task completed.
And I think that's what the organizations need more of, leaders like you, that think like you, that understand that concept, can take a look from a holistic perspective, if anything, from I would call a helicopter perspective. Because from the moment you're not involved personally, and you can actually see from a panoramic perspective, then you're able actually to maybe even maneuver those puzzles, those pieces of information and different people. It's not about just getting rid of people or blaming people. Hang on, this person is fantastic, but perhaps for another department, or maybe to work together with other team members, and they will be perfect. Just like puzzles, right? You have a puzzle, it cannot be the same to work well together. You need to fit, right?
Learn how to use the strength of every culture to the full capacity. Exactly right.
Exactly. Wow, lovely. That's so interesting. Michael, that really sounds amazing. But I'm so certain now that the audience is like, hang on, what about mobility in general? And, there's so much being spoken about those days, cars that will be driving without drivers. This is a lot of innovation. And, we hear about scooters becoming more and more popular, less cars in the street, wherever you go, whether it's in Europe, here in Dubai as well. So, wow, it's people with scooters all over the place. So where does it come, this passion, and how do you see the mobility and innovation really going to pick up in the next few years? And what other exposures do you have as well aside from that?
Yes. So first of all, I think transportation is really in a transformation mode right now, and it's happening very rapidly. Companies like GM, like Ford, like Mercedes, like BMW, they're actually committing that by 2030, all their vehicles will be based on electric drive cars. So right now we're seeing a huge transformation from the emission, from the propulsion engine into a hybrid electric vehicle. And we're going from what you would call a mechanical drive to really a drive by wire. It's no different than having, the electric toy with a remote control where you could just push the button and it just goes so fast.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have all these mechanical components to make the wheel turn. With that comes an incredible movement in the software capability to actually support the communication between, the roads, between the vehicle, between the driver, and that is actually now pushing the future cars into autonomous driving. The problem that we're facing today mainly is really safety. Many of the car companies like to say that I have the software at level 3 or level 4, and these are different levels in terms of achieving full autonomy, if you will, in terms of autonomous. But the concern is really safety. And if you think about Tesla today, they are most advanced in electric vehicles. In terms of where mobility is going, I see really great opportunities for roads, infrastructure, for countries that eventually will have mobility, autonomous driving in their region, that they need to set up the infrastructure to be able to accept, how these cars are actually driving on the roads. How are they communicating with each other? How do they communicate with the road, traffic lights, bridges? How do they deal with the weather conditions for each country? And how do you create, most importantly, a mobility aspect that makes your city very resilient and stands the times of being the city for people that could enjoy making a transportation in total comfort and in total convenience. They're 100% in a communication mode, and they're able to take a train, a bus, a car, a scooter, Uber, and then it goes beyond the automotive field, where it's actually hitting now the mining field, the agricultural field. So anything that moves can potentially become part of the mobility. So it's a very exciting field. I look at Dubai as an example, to be a really great region right now to start to set up its infrastructure to really be able to make mobility one of a kind, like Dubai has done in many areas, create an atmosphere for all the international people that live in Dubai to actually enjoy the mobility to its fullest extent. And I think there's probably a lot of opportunities for people that are hearing this to get involved in how they can help the Middle East to kind of get to that level.
That's a great example, because I do have quite a few number of clients actually who are in the automotive industry and they want a bit of a change. So I think here are some suggestions already that you're proposing, like they can easily transfer their skills. So any transportation or mobility that's willing to go into, it's accompanying, let's say, the trends of the world in terms of emission of, CO2 and so on. And Michael, that leads me to actually one aspect of, I hear a lot of private equities investing in those startups and they become unicorn overnight, so that they become publicly listed. I also know that you have a great deal of exposure with private equities. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I was fortunate actually in the last 15 years of my career to work for 4 different private equity portfolio companies. And, I was able to actually grow the value of the company from what it was initially at about $30 million value to over $1.3 billion in about 12 years. And
how do you do that, Michael? Can you teach us the formula? And if by any chance, can you share a little bit your secret? That's amazing.
Yeah, so to grow to that level, we went through 4 different private equities, and basically, to be successful in private equity, you have to be extremely focused on creating value, and in that you create EBITDA, which is really the earnings at a net income level that combined with the right mix of the product diversification and with the right mix of the customer base, then you can improve the multiple of the company. So the first company would buy us at a multiple of 7 or 8 of the earnings. The last company bought us at about 20 times multiple of the earnings. And then when you're growing the earnings over the years, then the value of the company goes out significantly.
Wow.
And basically, just to kind of talk a little bit about private equity, it started in 1978, back when they were leveraging assets in many companies, especially in the US. And then it grew to a point where now there's over 2,700 private equity firms in the world. Private equity firms, they rely on companies that are already producing a steady income of about $30 million and a steady earnings of about 26% of sales. They rely on companies that are diversified in products and they have a diversified customer base. And they try to actually do consolidations and do mergers and acquisitions to be able to really improve the pricing power with the customers. And in that's where the success really comes in. And one last thing about private equity for people that don't know, if you look historically in the last 20 years, the private equity firms have actually earned on their investments 300% year over year in 20 years which would be twice as much as you would earn on your money if you were in the S&P 500.
Wow. Michael, look, I think private equity, honestly, it's a fascinating topic. If you would be willing to come back to the show, let's have a full discussion on that, because I have lots of clients saying, hey, I just want to go to PE now. It's fascinating. And then there's so much differences in mindset. And I honestly find it fascinating, right? So would you be willing to come back to the show for us to talk about private equities?
I would love to. We could have a full
That's
talk.
a deal. I'm going to bring it to season 2, and that's going to be our topic then. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time left today. So it was a good, I think, start also of private equities. I'm so certain I'm going to have so many people asking me, hey, can we have Michael back? Because we want to learn more about it. So Michael, just before I go to my last question, if somebody wants to reach out to you to talk about mobility, innovation, airbags, or even about private equity success, how can they reach out to you?
Well, the best way is through LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. I'd be very happy to be contacted by any of your listeners. Anybody that wants help, wants an advice, I'd be pleased to do that.
That's so nice of you, Michael. I really appreciate it. I have a very lucky audience and clients, because I know they're going to be asking me, hey, can you please introduce me to Michael? I really appreciate it. I hope you're going to have enough slots in your calendar, Michael. Great. So Michael, now my very last question. So if you were to look back, let's say you are already ahead of time, you are already retiring, happy ever after, wealthy, enjoying your life. But then it's time to, hey, what have I done in terms of what legacy have I left, right? What impact would you have created? How would you like to have been perceived as somebody who actually, touched people's lives?
Yeah, I think the earlier mission of saving people's life by designing products that actually are keeping people alive today and also reducing their injuries that they could have gotten from a car accident. People are walking, they're able to breathe, they don't have any permanent injuries. I think this has really been a great noble cause that I've experienced in my lifetime. The next step that I'd like to be remembered with is really trying to avoid crashes altogether by actually helping in the autonomous driving, by actually expanding the mobility aspect. And now people can ride in cars, on scooters, on motorcycles. They can walk on the streets and actually be able to actually not get into a crash to begin with. And I think that's a really noble way. But lastly, I feel that the experience that I've gotten through my life and working here in the US on so many different levels is something that I really like to take to the Middle East specifically, because that's the region of my birth. And I feel like I would be content if I was able to help, my people and my region to actually get up to the same technology level that we have experienced in the West.
Wow, this is really fascinating, Michael. I really appreciate it. And it's really, really, I can see it's really deep within you, this desire to, make a difference in the world for people's mobility, and be safer around the world. So, Michael, I want to thank you so much for being here today. It's been absolutely a pleasure to have you in this show.
And thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and thanks to your audience as well.
That's my pleasure. It's been an honor. So everyone, thank you so much for watching and being part of this community. I really hope you have enjoyed and feel ready to revamp up your career with the amazing insights shared by Michael Jarouche. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel to get amazing insights from top elite executives across the world. Until next time, stay blessed.